We can start now that Dave Kern's there.
Yes.
Anybody home?
So,
Yeah, are you?
so Dave, what watch are you wearing?
Oh, you know what watch I'm wearing. Hey, guess what's for dinner?
Pizza,
Pizza.
or is that recycled cardboard? I can't.
So, do you understand what I did with that spreadsheet now?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay.
It makes perfect
I guess
sense.
we don't need to discuss it any further, at least not in polite company.
No,
No.
no, it's not of interest to most people.
Right. Okay.
It's probably not an interest to anyone.
How many people are on board so far?
Well, we have 13 participants right now on the call.
Good. Well, until I have my thing, I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself.
Okay.
Good idea.
Brad, you'll be sharing the slides from your screen unless there's a hiccup.
I can do that.
Did you have the power loss last night?
Yep.
Okay, as did we. Did you have another one today?
No.
Okay, some people had some today, so. Okay, we're up to 17 people. Don and Carol have joined us. Carol, you are muted. Although your mouth is moving. Okay, Carol, you're still muted.
If we lost power
Yes.
to be able to participate in a Zoom, I have to have the modem working. Is that accurate?
No, if you lose power, you could call in through the phone number, the one
Right.
under the link, and then you could.
But
You
if I'm
could hear.
streaming it and I'm using Verizon Wireless, why do I need to do anything? I'm asking you because I don't understand technology.
Right.
And you have exactly 10 seconds before this program works to give me the answer.
If you're streaming through if your modem will not work if there's a power outage. If
But then
that's
I
what
wouldn't
you're
need my,
asking.
yeah, okay.
But the cellular network more times than not will work. However, the bandwidth will be severely limited. So it probably would be hard to do video. However, you're more likely to be able to do audio at that point.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. I'm going to mute Carol since her phone is ringing. Oh, Vicky, thank you for renaming yourself.
I don't know how to do it permanently. I have to go in there and do it every time. So
Okay, that's
I'll
good.
figure that out at some point. It's on my to-do list.
So the other person I'm hoping will rename themselves is listed right now as ADI Adins, and not sure who
And
that
that's
is.
her name.
Okay. Addie Adins. Okay, good. Okay, we're up to 23 people, and
And growing.
it is 7 o'clock. So anytime you want to start.
Okay,
can.
we'll give him an extra 60 seconds because I'm
Okay.
feeling generous.
Okay. I always like to reward the people who are on time, but that's just me.
In that case, yes. Let's not punish any more than we need to the early adapters or early arrivers.
Okay, we're up to 26 participants.
Okay, and I see you're recording it. Good. Okay,
Yeah.
and so let's get started. My name is Brad Waite. I'm the president of the Sustainable Rossmore. Thank you all very much for giving up your time on this winter evening. This is obviously the the January members meeting for Sustainable Rossmore. So what I will now do is share my screen and the slide deck. Okay, am I safe in assuming you can all see that?
Yes.
We're all muted, so.
I saw that, Barry. Thanks. It's really good for getting feedback. Okay. And so here's the agenda for tonight. My introduction is going to be very quick and actually was already done. I see that Amanda and Dave Casey are on. Amanda is our treasurer, so she's going to handle the financial report. Dave Kern will handle the membership report. And then Barry's going to talk about donations. We've been very fortunate to sweet talk Cindy Darling into coming and talking to us about the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Then I'll give a quick message and we'll have our normal committee updates and with questions. And so on that note, Amanda, you want to unmute yourself? Oh, I forgot the ground rules.
Okay.
You want to go with those, Barry?
Yeah, for the ground rules, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. And at this point, everyone hopefully will know how to do that. If you wish to speak, either electronically raise your hand or send a chat. I'll be monitoring the chat during the talk unless Brad loses power and I have to take over the slides. And if you're having any problems, you can call me at that number if you write it down, or I'll put it in the.
And you can also try Dave Casey at the number above Barry's. Okay.
Okay,
I'm
that's
sorry.
all. Thank you.
Okay, Amanda, you want to go over the treasurer's report?
This is Amanda Casey, the treasurer of Sustainable Rossmore. We started our bank balance at the beginning of December with $11,622. We received revenue of $300, and we had donations of $5,515 for an ending bank balance of $6,907. And I'm going to go over the details of the donations on the following page. We had a committee that joined together to review potential donations because we felt that we had excess cash in our balances. $2,000 went to Eden Reforestation Fund, which reforests many.
I'm sorry, Amanda.
Oh, go
I was
ahead.
going to give.
Oh,
I was
please
going to
go
give this
ahead.
part. Okay, thank you. Right. So a group of Sustainable Rossmorians got together to work out where we were going to donate money. First, the steering committee decided that we could donate from our funds $5,000, and this is a one-time event that's not going to be an annual event. A group got together and worked out criteria, and it basically broke down to 40% of those funds going to worldwide causes, specifically combating climate change, another 40% going to 2 regional efforts, and then 20% investing in the future for future environmentalists. 2,000 of that, the worldwide, went to Eden Restoration Fund. The Tree Planting and Preservation Committee found them to be the most efficient. They evaluated either a bunch of options, and they were the most efficient at planting trees, basically at 10 cents a tree or less in rainforest areas. So this $2,000 represents over 20,000 trees being planted in rainforest areas. In the regional area, we had $1,000 to Sunflower Alliance and $1,000 to Baykeeper. The Baykeeper one was especially close to our first president, Hart, and since part of the funds that we were committing were from his the group. And Brad, can you help me out here on?
Yes, our original president, Wayne Lanier, was one of the founders of a club here in Rossmore called Informed Rossmore Voices, IRV. And this past year, they decided that they would close down and stop doing business. And so they gifted Sustainable Rossmore $2,000 out of the $4,000 they had left over in their checking account.
Thank you. And then finally, two groups, we were giving $500 each for helping them with programming with their youth on environmental items, Youth versus Apocalypse and Oakland Technical High School. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, Amanda, you want to come back and quickly walk
Yeah.
us through the
Yes.
proposed budget for this year?
Right. So we're going to be starting 2021 with $6,907 in our bank account. We're expecting membership fees of $2,600, which will mostly come in later in the year, and $250 of donations for a total revenue of $2,850. We expect our general membership expenses for the year to be $2,824, with in-person meetings starting to happen in July 2021. And we expect to have donations to other programs or special programs of $1,500. So we expect to end 2021 with $5,433 in our bank account. Are there any questions at this time?
And just so everybody is aware, this budget has not been approved yet by the steering committee. It'll be submitted to them on Monday, right, Amanda?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Dave Kern, you want to talk about the membership for the last time?
Dave, I just muted you inadvertently. Sorry, please unmute yourself. Dave.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. Aloha, everybody. My name's Dave Kern. I'm the membership chair for Sustainable Rossmore. As you can see by the slide that's in front of you, you can all read. I'm not going to go over it all. But for last month in December, we had 10 renewals and 3 new members. I've got a feeling that the number that Amanda predicted for new membership fees and that total amount of 2,600 may be a little bit high. I've got a feeling that because we're not meeting in person, that we're going to have somewhat of a shortfall with renewed memberships this year. We're getting a few new members, not as many as we normally would, and I think there are fewer renewals as well. So I can only say that I encourage everyone to renew their memberships, everyone also to talk up Sustainable Rossmore, and to the extent that they can, encourage people to join the club. And I also cheated and scrolled down the line of all of the people that are on this call. And there are some names that are not members. And so for those that are not, please consider joining. We would appreciate having you as members and to join the club and to become active members. Are there any questions of me?
Thanks, Dave. And to your last point about, people joining as new members, that's why I put the link down the very bottom. Probably if you don't have a membership form, a printed membership form that you can use, you can just go to our website, sustainablerossmore.org, and there's a link you'll see in the top section that says join us, pay dues. Click on that and it shows you all the information, where to send the check to, how much, etc. The grand total of $20 for the year. And as long as I've got the floor back again, let me just make a couple quick comments on membership. And I'd like to thank Dave for his work as membership chair over the last year or two. And he is stepping down as of the end of last year. And as soon as we can, fully replace him, which we're working on. We have, at this point, looks like we're going to bifurcate his responsibilities, and the part of recording and handling, membership, recordings and dues collections, etc., will be taken over by my wife, Paula Erickson. And the membership chair officially, Kathy Seidel, we realized that that she's got higher skill sets, that we should use for something else. And so we are in the process of discussing with Kathy, what we can, how we can best use her. And so we'll, have that, probably finalized within the next, week or so. So that's a long-winded way of saying several things. Thanks, Dave. Welcome, Paula, and thank you for stepping forward. And thanks, Kathy. We'll be with you real soon, and looking forward to bigger and better things. Okay, next is Don McGregor, our program coordinator, is going to be introducing Cindy. So Don, if you need to unmute yourself.
He unmuted himself.
Okay,
I like the slide, Brad. Thank you.
certainly.
Hello, good evening. Good evening to guests of Sustainable Rossmore. I'm Don McGregor, and as we kick off a new year, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Sustainable Rossmore to tonight's program highlighting the work of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. 2021 marks the 60th anniversary of Save the Bay, founded by three great ladies of Contra Costa's West County, Sylvia McLaughlin, Esther Gulick, and Catherine Kerr, who as friends started the organization and the movement to which, over the years and decades, has won legal protections for the San Francisco Bay shoreline. At Save the Bay's 50th anniversary, they were embarked on planning a ballot measure of a parcel tax to fund wetland restoration along all 9 counties of Bay shoreline. In 2016, the measure passed and the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority was born. Sustainable Rossmore speaker this evening is the chair of Citizen Oversight for San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Our speaker is a Bay Area original with expertise on the science, policy, and people of the entire San Francisco Bay estuary, gained from a career encompassing California Department of Fish and Game, the Bay Delta Authority, and now the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. In 1994, tonight's speaker won exemplary species and habitat protections for California Fish and Game in negotiations with powerful Contra Costa Water District's bid to build a new reservoir in East County. With the permitting of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir, the first new reservoir in California in a decade was built. Her negotiating party from Contra Costa Water District was, as our speaker says, the cute young project manager who, upon completion of agreements, asked her out to lunch, and 2 years later, they were married. Our speaker is Cindy Darling, a career wildlife biologist and newly elected member on Walnut Creek City Council. From Save the Bay, Cindy Darling has been passed the torch of environmental stewardship and leadership as chair of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Please join with Sustainable Rossmoor in a big Rossmoor wave. Hello to Cindy Darling. Cindy?
Thanks, guys. And thank you for the introduction. I'm still not quite sure how I went from being a wildlife and fisheries biologist to a city council member, but somehow it all made sense. As Don was talking about, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority really stands on the shoulders of Save the Bay and the movement that started in the 60s. And then it went forward, and Cargill, who owned much of the salt ponds in the South Bay, in the early 2000s was looking to sell that land. And Senator Feinstein got together and said, well, we can buy the land, but we can't do everything. So we need to find a way to restore the salt ponds. And this all kind of grew. The Restoration Authority was created in 2008 as an entity to bring everything together. And it has a governing board that is local elected officials from around the region. And it's spelled out in the act how everybody gets assigned. And John Joya represents Contra Costa County. It has an advisory committee, which is where all the working people are. I'm a retired person. I don't have to do the advisory committee stuff anymore. But so I worked on the oversight committee, independent oversight committee, and we were a team of 6 experts around the Bay. I think we had a total, we added it all up one day, it was 180 years of experience funding restoration projects. And our job has always been to come in and look over the shoulder of the staff doing the work and tell them, well, you know, you're doing good there. That right there, you need to fix that. So that whole Restoration Authority was created. Measure A got on the ballot in 2016 and it passed. It's a 12 per, you can go to the next slide, please. It's $12 parcel tax per property. It was passed all 9 counties in the Bay Area, 70% support, and it provides that gold for habitat restoration, which is an ongoing funding source. You can always find bond dollars for a purchase, but to find the money to do the restoration and manage the land over time is always the real trick. So next slide, please. So what kind of projects can the authority do? It's habitat projects. It focuses on tidal wetlands, managed ponds, habitat along the shoreline. It also has a flood management part of it. If you think about the South Bay, where those Cargill salt ponds were, where all this started, it's a really flat part of the bay, and only a couple feet up in elevation from the bay is things like Google and Apple and Yahoo, and those are all very vulnerable to sea level rise and to flood management problems with the water coming down into the South Bay. So there's a flood management aspect to this, and there's also a recreational aspect. You know, during the pandemic, we've all seen how important it is for people to have access to natural areas. It's the only thing that's kept people sane throughout all of this. And there's another part of this that we've also been focusing on in the last year, which is an environmental justice part of it. The way the bay is set up, you know, the wealthy people live up in the hills, and then you get down into that flat floodplain. And that's where a lot of the poorer communities are. And we're looking to find ways to help those poorer communities enjoy the resources that are right there next to them. So we also have an environmental justice component to this. So places like over in Richmond, there's efforts to restore in conjunction with the local communities. Next slide, please. So subtidal habitats are those things below the low tide, and they've tried not to get too far out into the bay. And the baylands are the above subtidal, and then you've got the transition zones up into uplands. And you need to get these areas all working together to make a habitat work. But there is a focus in along the shoreline. And that is one of the things, it's a challenge for a place like Walnut Creek because we are not along the shoreline. So that's too bad. Next slide, please. So they also went through and identified what are some of the specific things that we're trying to do. Because whenever you're trying to do habitat restoration, you have to have an idea of what your objective is and how you're going to measure it. So they want to reduce pollution. They want to clean up and restore trash removal, restoring the wetlands and the creeks where they flow into the bay. And so anything that does one of those things is eligible for funding. And so you'll see as we get into this, there's some projects that you wouldn't normally think of as being a habitat restoration project that are getting included. Next slide, please. So there's also, I came from the Delta, and in the Delta, it's all about the fish. And that's one of the nice things about coming to the bay is when you get to the bay, it's about everything. It's about the fish and the birds and everything that's going on. So they are working closely with the National Wildlife Refuge, San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge, and trying to expand habitat for fish, birds, and mammals, and protecting other wetlands around the bay. And then the stewardship, maintenance, and monitoring of the habitat restoration projects. That is one of those things that from my career in habitat restoration is the hardest to get funded. Everybody wants to have that groundbreaking ceremony and they want to throw open the doors. Nobody wants to pay to fix those doors when they get broken a year later. So that's one of the things that comes into play here. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit about the integrated flood protection is if you have wetlands in front of a levee or a levee behind the wetlands, you can have them work together to help protect those shoreline communities. The infrastructure that's down there, because that's where all your wastewater treatment plants are, the agriculture that is still around the bay, and the shoreline communities. A lot of people want to live down on the bay. And so we're looking at wetlands and habitat restoration projects that integrate that flood component to it. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the Walnut Creek project, Lower Walnut Creek. Next slide, please. Public access. You can, if you have a project that's constructing new, repairing, replacing trails, signs, facilities, interpretation, outreach. This is all one of those things that's really important to help keep people connected to the bay. Back in the 60s, when those pioneering women started Save the Bay, you couldn't get to the bay and people just didn't even know it was there. And so we want to make sure that we have enough public access so people keep that emotional connection to the bay. And it's healthier for us, it's healthier for the bay, and it's part of the program. Next slide, please. So what they ended up setting up for Measure AA dollars is a grant program that's running on about an annual basis. And so projects will come in and they'll look at them and they're looking for positive impact, long-term impact, geographic distribution. There was, we'll see this later in the presentation, there was some promises made around the region that everybody would get it, even though the South Bay projects we're really ready to go and have gotten a very large chunk of the early money, the intent is that this restoration is throughout the bay. It's not just those salt ponds. One of the things that we've been able to do with this money is leverage state and federal dollars, Army Corps of Engineers, other funding sources back in Washington, D.C. There's nothing quite like walking in and saying, you've got a local match to help you leverage those federal dollars. Disadvantaged communities, this is the environmental justice component that we talked about. And then benefit to the region's economy. The Bay itself is really important for the health of the region. It's part of why we're different than a lot of other cities. And then you kind of go through and have criteria that help bring young people in. And we also want to make sure that people are not just planning for their groundbreaking, but planning for their project to be sustained over time so that they have the stewardship. Next slide, please. So this is the geographic distribution. I think this is as of the end of round 3. And so you see the East Bay actually is getting a fair amount of money. The South Bay gets some, and then there are Bay-wide projects. Next slide, please. So this shows you kind of what the promises were, the 20-year targets. And so you see the South Bay, the first couple rounds, they did really, really well because they have those big salt ponds that are ready to go. And so they've done well. When I at the end of the first cycle, and I came in on the oversight committee, I looked at this, I said, oh, East Bay's doing okay. How many of those are in Contra Costa County? And they said, none. I said, why not? And they said, well, nobody applied. And so that was one of the first things that the oversight committee said is you need to go back out as staff and beat the drums and try to find things in Contra Costa County, because you're never going to meet that East Bay target without some substantial projects. This is East Bay is kind of Alameda and Contra Costa County, and they've been doing some projects in Alameda, but they need to get going on Contra Costa. North Bay similarly, and West Bay, the funding is lagging behind, but the hope is through some of the things that the Restoration Authority is doing, we're going to be able to help develop those projects and get them to the point where the salt ponds are. Next slide, please. So it's a little hard to see on this one. There's 17 projects funded to date, and they do, after the first round, and we noticed that Contra Costa didn't. They have funded several projects, and they have some more in the hopper in Contra Costa. So we now have them in all the counties. They're surrounding the Bay. There are still a fair amount in the South Bay, but the North Bay and the East Bay are catching up. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple examples of the projects that have been included in the first couple grant rounds. There's a large marsh restoration. There's the South Bay Shorelines project. This is where you see the big money going to the South Bay. $61 million for construction. And those are projects that are in the old salt ponds that people have been planning on those for a long time. They have ties to the local folks. They are in the South Bay where you're protecting that infrastructure from flooding associated with climate change. So that just gives you an idea of what those two, they're very big habitat projects and multi habitat types in them. And they do have that flood control aspect. Next slide. So where we are right now is there was a round of proposals that came in last October and I'll cover this in a second, but the funding should be coming out next spring. They also funded a bunch of community-based grants to community organizations to help build that organizational muscle so that the environmental justice groups could begin to be more competitive. And it seems silly, but it takes a lot of money to compete for money. You look at something like the Nature Conservancy, they have tons of people that are ready to write grants. community organizations in Richmond probably don't have that kind of money. So there was they decided to go ahead and put some money out for those programs. You know, one of the other things that we've been doing, and this is going to sound also somewhat counterintuitive, but it is really hard to get permits for environmental restoration projects because you're in the most environmentally sensitive areas. And so one of the other things that has been funded all the way through the first 3 rounds is this integrated technological team or technology team. It's the BRIT, BRRIT. But anyway, it's the permitting group. It involves all the agencies, and there is a huge alphabet long list of people that have permits in the Bay. There's BCDC, there's EPA, there's Fish and Game, there's Fish and Wildlife Service, there's National Marine Fisheries Service, there's the State Water Board, there's the Regional Water Board, and it brings the staff of all those groups together so that they can give really clear direction and come up with an organized permitting program for the projects so that they don't get held up by permits. And it seems completely counterintuitive, but my experience working in restoration is that that is one of the things that will hold up really great projects. And so I've always been supportive of the funding for the BRIT. Next slide, please. And I'm going to go ahead and switch, and I'm going to pull up my slide because I've got a couple of things I added. So you need to, there we go. And let's see. There we go. Go forward. I want to talk about the West or the Walnut Creek one. Oops, there we go. Went too far. So this talks about in that first round of projects, there was nothing in Contra Costa because nobody asked for money. And if you don't ask for money, nobody's going to give you money. And so in one of the more recent rounds, Contra Costa County Flood Control with their partners on the Lower Walnut Creek project got $7.9 million to restore tidal marsh and in the area adjacent to where Walnut Creek flows into Suisun Bay. And it's 3.2 miles of creek. It's got trails, environmental education, and other opportunities like that. So that's been great. I think the project is getting ready. Bob Simmons is on the call, and he probably knows better than I do where they are as far as things. And then this is kind of what the future is going to hold. This is the North Shore of Contra Costa County along here. And these are all the things in the Eco Atlas that are potential projects. So this is where the North Walnut Creek project, or the Walnut Creek project is. There's projects all the way down here in Antioch. This is the Suisun Marsh, Grizzly Bay. And there's projects, the Montezuma Wetlands Project, restoring some of the fish screens so that the marshes can divert water without harming fish. So there's a whole bunch of things that could happen here along this part of the bay. This is one of the, there's not much you could do here because the water rips through there and there's no restoration opportunities because it's just rock, but there's lots of opportunities right here where Walnut Creek comes in and along the Pittsburgh Antioch shoreline. There's the Dow wetlands out there. There's a number of different things they could do there. And then you could get up here into the Antioch area and there's Antioch dunes and things like that. So I'm hoping that with the support of everybody locally, we could do a lot more to attract that, $90 million they promised to Contra Costa County and get it spent in areas where our folks here can enjoy it. Some of the other projects that are, and I don't have it on this screen, one of the other things that they're doing is they're looking at wastewater treatment facilities and how they can use the effluent from that to improve the water quality of the bay by running it through a marsh. And there's opportunities to do that here. Central Sands plant is right here. This is where our poop all goes, and it goes out here. Delta Diablo's plant is up here, and it goes out here. Both of those have opportunities to run through marshes before they go into the bay, and that would be a great water quality improvement. So there's lots of interesting things that can happen, but this is a funding source for the next 20 years. It's money that will actually help take land acquisition and turn it into reality and turn it into restoration projects. My experience on the Oversight Committee, I was the chair for 2 years, and the staff is doing a tremendous job. I think we're going to make great progress on this. The sad thing is that you can't be on the Oversight Committee if you're an elected official. So I had to resign on November 30th before I took the oath of office to take on the city council. But before I left, I talked to a friend of mine who was active in this for a lot of years into taking my job over. So hopefully they'll be able to continue to add value to the situation. And there's just lots of great opportunities here. There's money to get things done, and I'm excited. It's as a person who spent 30 years doing restoration on a shoestring, it's great to have this kind of money and this kind of broad support from our community for this. So that's the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, and I'd be happy to answer questions or anything that anybody wants to ask. Oops.
Okay, you can raise your hands or chat or to let me know if you have a question, but you can unmute yourself.
Carol, is your hand up or are you just waving at the mic at the mic at the?
I was typing in both. I mean, I do have a question, and I got it half typed into chat because I wasn't sure.
Go ahead, Carol.
You mentioned the different allocations for the different parts of the bay, and there was a category called Bay-wide for 50%. Can you give us an example of what is a Bay-wide project?
Bay-wide projects tend to be either things that help us track things like if you go on the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, there's the Eco Atlas, which is a bay-wide compilation of information on all the different restoration projects, because the Restoration Authority is only one of the entities, because we're confined to the shoreland, but there's upper, folks who are working upstream, folks that are working out in the bay itself. There's also water quality projects. There's the permitting technical team. There's educational projects. So it's a whole variety of different things. So there's very place-based projects, and there's also some more general projects.
Okay.
Where does the bay become the delta?
The bay becoming the delta is it's part legal and it's part physical. If you think about it, when you get to probably Benicia, from there's the San Pablo Bay, and that's kind of that whole Contra Costa shoreline. If you go upstream from there, there is a point that is widely debated amongst lawyers about where it becomes the delta, but it's typically the Delta Protection Act has the primary and secondary delta, and that is right around Antioch, and upstream from that becomes the delta. And the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority's funding is concentrated on the bay. The other programs are funding restoration up in the delta and fighting about it and having a really great time. And I'm really glad I don't work with them anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob Simons, you have a question?
Actually, Barry, no, I have about 5 different questions. So, but let me just sort of focus on 1 or 2 if I can, Cindy. And some of you know me in my former capacity as a council member. Some of you may know me because of the tree planting activities I've been doing with the Rossmore Tree Planting Group. But I'm also chair of something called the Walnut Creek Watershed Council. And Rossmore is in the Walnut Creek watershed. Tice Creek flows into Las Trampas and downtown Walnut Creek, which flows into Walnut Creek, which starts at what is known as Broadway Point in downtown Walnut Creek. And so, Cindy, the first question, I will contact you separately, but I would really like you to give this a very similar presentation to the Walnut Creek Watershed Council, as we are looking at funding opportunities and how we can actually continue to restore the riparian watershed of the Walnut Creek watershed. And so, I mean, I think your presentation today really fits with that fairly well. In the area of I'll ask just one sort of not quite silly question. Actually, it's a serious question. You talked about public access.
Mhm.
One of the things that is most frustrating to somebody that likes to walk, and as I do, is the county flood control district has taken the position that it has no authority to allow people to walk along the areas where it has a right of way, whether it is a concrete channel or whether it's an earthen channel with a wide floodplain. And do you have any thoughts about how you can change the opinion of the flood control district, or the willingness of the flood control district to do something different? Because this is my personal thought, by the way. I think they're making a big mistake by not involving people in water.
Mhm.
And they're looking at the fact that this concrete channel is now X number of years old, is not going to live forever. No concrete channel does. What are they going to do afterwards? But they're excluding people from this area, so they don't really have the appreciation of. And I think virtually everybody on this call has probably played in the creek sometime when they were a kid. But our kids can't play in my grandkids can't play in the creek because they're all in concrete channels or culverts. How do we change that mindset? That is actually also a mindset, by the way, of city councils throughout the Bay Area, that the best thing you can do with a creek is to put it into culvert.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough thing because once you put it in a culvert, there's an attorney somewhere in that process. And we all know what those attorneys want to do. They want to minimize liability. And so that's part of why in this funding package, we're saying, you know, you get points. You are hitting more of what we're trying to do because you want kids and those of us who are no longer kids, but still kid-like, to be able to go out and enjoy it. And that creates a sense of ownership by people. We always have this with endangered species people, you always have this huge debate about whether or not it's okay to have people out in endangered species habitat. Because yes, if they bring their dog, they will affect the snowy plovers. But if they never see a snowy plover, they have no appreciation for what it is. And so we want to, you know, all the Restoration Authority can do is incentivize projects that include that component. You know, we don't have, they don't have ability to, but they can sure tell people that your project would be much better if it included this. The big challenge with Walnut Creek is going to be how far up is the shoreline. And I don't know, I know staff, I know Sam and those folks probably have a strong opinion on how far up the shoreline goes. So that might be good to have them in on it.
Do you think, and this is my final question, Barry, so I apologize for just stepping in one more time. Do you think there's a level of interest in the authority in funding a project that converts the two large drop structures to fish labs?
I think I get which two structure are you thinking? The drop structures.
Yeah, the ones that actually, I mean, at the one that is furthest downstream, there are salmon there every year.
You know, that's always a challenge because
you can answer that one later, Cindy.
Yeah, it's a challenge because we have so significantly changed the upper end of the watershed.
Yeah,
I have always been, but yet Puda Creek talked me into funding things there, and they promised that the salmon would come, and they did. So they might come. Who knows?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Paul Wright, you have a question?
No, it's been answered. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, Dave Casey or Amanda, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Cindy, for this talk. I'm certainly in favor of the sort of biological, environmental aspects and support what the Restoration Authority does. I just thought it was interesting that so much money would go to as you said in one of your examples, the floodplain in South Bay. It looked really quite an extensive levee, quite a long distance. And I certainly support flood management when it is in touch with other restoration like marshes or islands and stuff that provide flood protection in a sort of a natural way. But levees are like a different thing. Wouldn't the levees be more the responsibility of local agencies, or I don't even think property owners is appropriate, but maybe, and your money or the restoration people are voting for it for more of a environmental kind of a effort other than just building levees. It
Yeah.
seems like flood levies should be the responsibility of the government or local agencies or.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to build a straight flood control levee, that is nothing that you'll get money for here. A good example, this is a more mature flood control project up in the Napa River. When I first started working on the Napa River in the 90s, they had a very traditional trapezoidal channel planned for the Napa River. And the people of Napa looked at it and said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to do something bigger and better. And so they did a bunch of engineering work looking at how they could move levees back, give the river room to move. And because they had all those components together, this was in a previous life when I was doling out money in the Delta, we ended up giving them some money as part of that project. There was also flood control money that came in, but because they were really building a flood control project in a very different way that would allow the natural functions of the river to happen, people were saying, okay, we're willing to put our money into that. So you're not going to get you're not going to get the Bob Simmons trapezoidal channel through, but if you have a project that has all these different aspects to it, then it becomes eligible. And so hopefully that helps.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Dave. That's all the questions that I see.
I think
Are
we've
there-
got Marika down in the corner here.
Oh, okay. Marika, please unmute yourself.
Okay, Cindy, you mentioned that you would very much like to see more reclaimed water coming from, for instance, Central San, filtered through the wetlands before it's discharged into the bay. And you indicate that that would be a wonderful advantage to the bay. I would like you to comment on your view of environmentalists who are interested in encouraging the use of reclaimed water, such as water from Central San, to replace potable water, such as that from Contra Costa Water or East Bay Mud, for such things as irrigation. Could you comment on that? There's our two wonderful needs for the same water.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. If you look at, my husband used to be the general manager. After he left Contra Costa Water District, he was the general manager at Delta Diablo, which is the Pittsburgh and Antioch wastewater plant. And what they managed to do there was just amazing. They worked with the golf courses in Pittsburgh and Antioch, and they worked with getting state and federal funding to fund a water recycling project. And so they, during certain times of the summer, almost no water goes out of their outfall. It all goes to either the power plants or the golf courses. And that's probably the best because it replaces potable water, high quality water that's being used to water grass on a golf course. You don't have to fertilize the golf course anywhere near as much because it's getting fertilized with the water. And it reduces, effluent from a wastewater treatment plant is treated fairly well in California, but you can never get everything out of it. And so it's always better to find a way to recycle that water. But that said, and this is going to get into the wonkiest of water recycling planning, you can never plan on recycling everything because it will become not sustainable enough because people might all there might not be enough runoff at one point in time. So they never quite recycle everything. So there's always going to be something coming out, especially in the wintertime, because the wintertime is when you can get runoff that you couldn't put out on a golf course because they're not irrigating. So you always need to plan for some effluent, but it's by and large much, much better to recycle that water and find another use so that you're not diverting the potable water from the Delta or from the upstream of the Delta. So.
Can I follow up with that then? I appreciate your explanation and your opinion. Now that you're on the city council, I know that the city councils generally send a member to, as a representative to the various county agencies. As you know, parts of Walnut Creek are just a little bit beyond the purple pipes that come out of East Bay, out of Central San. What do you think, if you were a gambling woman, what do you think are the chances of the reclaimed water being eventually available to the entire Walnut Creek community?
You know, I think Central San, they have an elected board of 5 people, and they are the ones that we have to work with to convince them that there is an interest in recycled water, making it beyond, I think it comes up to Pleasant Hill right now. And then look at ways, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either intercept the wastewater as it's going downstream through a scalping plant, or you can send it back upstream, either through a pipe or something like that. So there'll be some planning to be done, but I would like to see Boundary Oak, the other golf courses around here, those kind of things converted over to recycle water.
We have 2 golf courses here in our community that we would certainly love to see irrigated with recycled water.
It's an expensive water supply because of the treatment and the transportation costs, but it's the future. It's where Southern California eats our lunch. We complain about them taking the water out of the Delta. They're so far ahead of us on recycled water that it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marika. And now Changlin, you have a question? Yes, you need to unmute yourself.
My question is, who can initiate a project?
For the Restoration Authority, they have
what kind of authority?
The San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Their funding sources are available to a wide variety of nonprofits or agencies. I think there's even the Montezuma Wetlands is a LLC, a private company. And so they've had to do some extra work to make sure that they're not gifting public dollars, but they're willing to work with a wide variety of applicants.
Okay.
Okay, are there any
Got
other
Paul.
questions?
Paul has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Cindy, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm particularly thrilled because Save the Bay was my first experience with social activism when it was a baby organization and I was a college student at Berkeley. My question is, along those lines, what opportunities are there for volunteers to be involved in restoration activities and Save the Bay?
I have lost track of the day-to-dayness of this all because and from my role, I'm up here just kind of looking down and finding out whether or not things are good. But I know there are restoration projects out there where you can volunteer. And Bob, there's local stuff here that Bob and others are doing. And then other projects have opportunities. So.
Thank you.
Barry, if I can follow up on that.
Okay, Bob.
Please just contact we have a website, it's wcwatershed.org. please just send a request or send an email to me. I'm a member of Sustainable Rossmore. We're doing stuff as often as we can, given the COVID restrictions. We are getting funding through the Regional Water Quality Control Board. That's mitigation funding, and we're doing a lot of work. So we actually would appreciate people coming in and offering whatever skills they have. You know, you don't have to be interested in removing a Rhododendron, which is a giant reed that is an invasive plant and invading our watershed. There's a lot of opportunities to do some things in the whole area of watershed protection. So let me know if you're interested. I'll be glad to sort of work with you on what can be done. Thanks. Right, Barry.
Right. Bob, can you put that contact information in the chat?
I will do it right now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Any other any other questions out there? Since we're recording this from my computer, I'm trying to minimize going to gallery view so that Channel 28 has a better view. And I should have mentioned that Channel 28 will be rebroadcasting this, especially Cindy's talk, assuming that we get permission from her to do that. So
We have one more question from Dale.
okay, Dale, go ahead.
Yes, when we in Rossmore here have been looking at the possibility of a reclamation project here, we were in communication with Central San, and we were informed that they're bringing that water, the water you was talking about, Cindy, up to Pleasant Hill, and we're not interested in bringing it beyond Pleasant Hill into Walnut Creek.
Yeah, they have a few other water recycling projects they're pursuing. They provide water to what used to be Shell Refinery and now is Marathon. And so, or they don't, Contra Costa does. So they've been focusing most of their water recycling planning on replacing Contra Costa's water there so that Contra Costa's water can get allocated somewhere else. So they have not been as eager to pursue water recycling, you know, further up the valley beyond Pleasant Hill. But I think it's something that we just have to keep mentioning it to them, that it would be a good thing to do. And, you know, sometimes you just keep talking about it and sooner or later it'll happen, especially depending on whether or not what happens back in Washington, DC with the election, because funding for water recycling is much easier to get if people are interested in pursuing that. And we'll see where we end up back in DC.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there any hands up?
I think Marika has one more.
Okay, Marika, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
You aren't unmuted.
There we go. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
The city of Walnut Creek has just beautifully and sustainably remodeled installed new landscaping in the very, very wide median strip on Tice Valley Boulevard. And they have, to their credit, been forward thinking enough to install purple colored pipes in that restoration. And to those of us involved in the community in sustainable concerns in Walnut Creek, those purple pipes are the most beautiful part of the whole beautiful project. So somebody in the city of Walnut Creek is very optimistic about getting that recycled water to our neck of the woods, and we hope you will very much support those efforts, but I can tell you already do.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just, it's where the world is going to go. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you all very much. I
Sure.
really
Cindy,
appreciate it.
thank you. Brad?
Yes,
back to
thank
you.
you, Cindy, very much. And Cindy, you're certainly, we'd love to have you stick with us for the rest of the meeting, but if you need to leave, we certainly understand that too.
I need to head out. My husband's got dessert going.
Oh, what's he making? We'll be right over.
I don't know. I have to go see what a mess he's made. Thank you guys all very much for letting me talk about the stuff that I love. So
thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, and so the next thing up on the agenda is, surprise, is my president's message. And so this is just going to be a quick update on the same message that I gave you last month, which is, clearly, I think we all know that if we truly want to have a fighting chance of, saving the planet and the environment, we need to take a lot more action, and we need to do it now. And so towards that goal, for the members of the steering committee, me, Barry Bryan, Carol Weed, and Don McGregor have been meeting to identify the campaigns that we think are going to be best candidates for us to get involved in next. And so we still have some more work to do on that, but we hope and expect that by next month we're ready to take the next step and unveil what we think, and then go from there on that. Okay, Barry, Carol, and Don, is there anything that I also should be mentioning, or we should mention on this one?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if they have anything, but I don't.
Okay. And hold on a second. Okay, and so then the next thing that's up is updates from the for what we call action committees, which were committees that were formed out of the efforts a year and a half ago to go through that same effort of identifying things that we can campaign areas that we can get involved in to be more effective. And so I'll give just a real quick one on the first one, which is Vote Climate, and that is, we do know that we're going to bifurcate it and do two things. We're going to keep working on electing the best environmental stewards. We're also going to amp up our efforts to advocate for local issues, local being state, county, city issues. So it's probably a good thing Cindy dropped off the call, because we will be talking to her more in her roles on the city council. And so, as you can all appreciate, we are looking for new members of the committee. So if you're interested in working with us, please get a hold of me. And I think that's enough. Any questions on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, and Barry, you're up.
Well, I just wanted to mention under the area of Vote Climate, and also since the election, a lot of effort has been placed in Georgia, which their polls closed.
I wonder why.
A few hours ago. But a group that we have been working with, Environmental Voter Project, has been continuing to work on converting environmentalists who were unlikely to vote into voting environmentalists. And this, I was just summarizing here information that I got from their founder, that EVP has converted a little over 100,000 out of an identified little under 400,000 unlikely to vote environmentalists. They've turned them into voting environmentalists. And then since the election, they've converted another 6,382 that did not vote in the November presidential election that were planning to vote in this runoff election. So so it shows that the people who have environmental concerns, do represent an increasing portion of the population, and these are the power that they have as those numbers go up, and it can make a difference. We will have to see what the final results are on the election. It's certainly too close to call. It's going back and forth right now, but we can be pleased at the roles that we've played in helping to convert non-voting environmentalists to voting environmentalists. And I think that's all I want to say on that.
Okay. And Adrian, anything you want to comment on this?
Please unmute yourself, Adrian.
Yep. Actually, this is a different slide than I thought I was going to see.
You can also wait till you get to your other slides.
Oh, okay. Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay. And Barry, you want to comment on this one, or should I press on?
So I'll just say that the committee continues to meet. They are formulating plans, especially on Arbor Day. They are interested in finding out what our plans are as an organization for Earth Month and what we can do during the pandemic. Even though we'll be in the waning parts of the pandemic, we still probably will not be meeting, but they certainly have an interest in participating in an Earth Month if we do something. So they're interested in that. I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if Bruce or Marilyn or Adrian have anything else they want to say here. The rest of this is similar to last month, so I wasn't going to repeat it.
Okay.
Okay, that's all. Yeah.
And Dave Casey, you want to?
Hi. So we're going to skip the next couple slides, but the only thing we really wanted to say was that, and one more, what was that planet-friendly eating is really taking a hold. And the greatest thing locally is that Starbucks down at the Tice Valley is offering new 1 or 2 planet-friendly sausage breakfast sandwiches. And during the month of January, they have a $2 discount on them. So go down on Monday and try out a planet-friendly breakfast sandwich from Starbucks. I know it's an advertising campaign and marketing, but we'll do whatever we can to encourage planet-friendly eating. Join our team if you're interested. We meet the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month. Any questions from people on this or other the people that have gone before? We sort of whipped through those other committees. Is there any questions? Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. And now, Adrian, you're back.
Okay, now the slide I expected. So the good news is that in the recent stimulus legislation that passed, the 26% solar tax credit has been extended through 2021. It was intended to originally was going to drop to 22% this year. So that's worth about $400 or $500 to the average solar installation. There was a lot of pressure on getting installations done before the end of 2020. And so all the installers were just going nuts trying to get things installed at that point. Now, of course, they're sitting there going, well, now we have crews, we need work for them to do. So if you're thinking of doing solar, this is probably a good time to do it. They have crews available. They're probably willing to give pretty decent prices. One of the things that the Solar Sustainable Rossmoor's Solar Committee is trying to think about is how can we increase the number of solar installations at Rossmoor? And we've come up with some ideas. And you know, if you have any ideas about this, we'd love to hear about them. We'd love to have you participate in solar, our committee's work. So please reach out to me if you would like, if you have any ideas, or if you would like to participate. For those of you who've been following, we've been doing a lot of work on microgrids, the idea of combining solar and batteries together so that you have resilience. The power stays on, unlike last night when it went off. Power stays on, and not only that, but it's affordable and it's sustainable. We are now in the process of working with a consulting company to think about ways that we could make microgrids available for many entries, many projects or mutuals within Rossmoor. I expect to have a report on that from the consultants by the end of this month, and we'll be reporting about it at the next meeting. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we can move on.
And Carol, do you have a question for Adrian?
I have a comment. I just wanted to make a pitch, and that is that people may not know, if they haven't already got solar, there's a wealth of information on the Sustainable Rossmoor website. Go to the residential solar section, and in addition to every project's and every mutual's policy manual and the differing policies, there's the steps one would take, how to find a good contractor, all sorts of other things, you know, pros and cons, problems you could run into. So I would encourage people who are just now deciding that it's going to save them a lot of money to look at that.
Great, thanks, Carol. And so Barry, it looks like we've got a couple people raise their hands. Do you know who was first?
This is Dale. Want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah, good news. 2 condos and the building right next to us installed solar last month.
That is good news.
That is good news. And I installed solar in September. It turned on in the middle of September. And just so everybody knows, my electric bill in November, which is a very poor solar month, because the sun is low and etc. My bill in November was $28 instead of about $150. So it really does, it zeroes out your bill for sure.
And his wife likes a house that's warmer than the average.
Yeah, Carol.
Okay, Dave or Amanda?
Hi, Adrian. Hey, I was just taking notes and I just thought I heard you say that the 26% discount, you could save $300 or $400. Did I mishear you?
That's correct. It's on a typical installation that we see here in Rossmoor, it's about $400 to $500. The difference between 26% and 22%.
But what would be the saving at 26%?
Oh, the total savings is typically $2,000 or $3,000.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Adrian, I've got a quick comment and question. That's in this area. One of the things you said that about these installers being really busy trying to cram in a lot of work before the end of the year may well be the reason why I had at least 2 residents in Rossmore, this middle of December or so, get a hold of me to say that they were having a extremely difficult time getting electrical contractors to return their calls and to come out and make a bid on installing an EV charging system. And so I'm guessing that's probably because the electrical contractors were all busy with the solar, but I don't know that.
Mhm. Yeah. Certainly, I mean, I'm in fairly constant or frequent contact with 2 or 3 of the installers that operate here fairly frequently, and they were all of them were saying they're just overrun, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was going to drop from 26 to 22%. But I also think that the power outages and everything else, I mean, there's lots of people out there who are wanting to put in batteries and do things of that sort.
Sure. And my guess is, yeah, and you've probably figured this out long before I did. My guess is we're going to see more and more frequent and severe power outages as PG&E slowly but surely still slips under the waves, in which will then incent more and more people to do something differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I do think that, I mean, PG&E, I know most people are not very kindly disposed towards them, but they are trying quite hard to do a better job of preventing these outages, and it may not affect us as badly as it did in the past, but it's still going to be there's no question about it. We're going to see more and more wildfires, and so there's going to be this sort of tension between, yeah, you can do a better job on one hand, but the climate is warming and you will see more fires. So, it behooves us in Rossmore to try and take control of our own destiny and look at how we generate power here. And if we can generate power ourselves and maintain it ourselves, then we'll be better off.
I agree. And thank you very much for all the hard work you're doing on this, especially on the microgrids. And so, okay, and any other questions for Adrian? Otherwise, we'll. Okay, you can always come back. Amanda, do you or Carol want to make any comments on this?
Actually, it's Carol, and I'll just say briefly, for those that were unaware of it, there's a group called the Walnut Creek Environmental Stakeholders that were identified by the City Council and appointed to give extra comments about the Sustainability Action Plan. That's a 10-year plan that is still being written. But all of us were more impatient than waiting for a 10-year plan. So we decided to write our own climate emergency resolution, which is something that nearly 2,000 communities have done. And several of us were involved with the county process, which was, it took 1.5 years, but successfully passed unanimously last September. So we borrowed some of our experience from them, some of the wording word for word, and now have a draft climate emergency resolution. This picture says 204. I think it's up to 207 now of you have signed the petition. So I thank you. If you haven't already signed it, please do. It's an online petition. All you have to do is click yes. And it on the petition, I mean, on at the link, it has the 2-page document that you can look at. It's divided into the first page that has resolutions, that has comments on all the dangers of climate change and why we should do something quickly. And the second part is certain actions that we want to take. And so we have met already with Cindy Darling. She's enthusiastic about it. It gave us some suggestions. And this group that includes we've reached out to the Youth Leadership Commission, which has 10 people on it. So altogether we're about 25 people. And so we're going in herds of 5 or 6 people at a time to each of the different council members on Zoom calls. And so we're setting up meetings now with the other 4 council members, and we'll be encouraging people. If you sign the petition, you'll get an email requesting that you speak on a Zoom meeting of the city council. And there's several coming up, and we hope that people will speak at each one, because we just want to drown the airspace with beating drums about the need to do something emergent about climate resolutions. And in the resolution, there's 6 specific actions that the community wants to take, and just needs the blessing of the council to go ahead and start doing some things. One of them involves planet-friendly eating and maximizing that with other restaurants. Some of the other issues that you've heard about before. So thank you for signing on, and I hope some of you will follow the instructions to get we'll share the proper Zoom link so that you can attend a fascinating Walnut Creek City Council meeting. The public comment section is at the beginning of the meeting. So if you sign in, you speak, then you can leave. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. So I didn't say that when Cindy was still on this call. But anyway, we met yesterday with Cara Batista Rao, the staff member, and are incorporating her suggestions. So we're making progress.
Carol, Adrian asks, how do we sign the petition? And I ask, can you put the link that you sent out on Google Groups previously onto the chat? So
I will. That's an excellent idea. People can sign on to during the rest of the meeting. Am I on for the next couple of slides? Because then I'll do it right after. What do we have next?
Yeah, I think you are. And before I change slides, let me just make sure that everyone here knows that the city of Walnut Creek did officially name Sustainable Rossmore as one of the stakeholders in helping them come up with the sustainability action plan. And Sustainable Rossmore asked Carol Weed if she would be our representative, and she was kind enough and gracious enough to say yes. So in case you had any doubts that Carol was speaking from a base of good knowledge, she is, and she's doing it officially. Thank you very much, Carol.
Okay. So I will enter that in the chat box when I know that I don't have to respond to a slide. So what's happening next here?
Okay, so next
Trash Talk
is
Committee.
you, Trash Talk.
Okay.
What's new in recycling?
Okay. If you get a Rossmore News tomorrow and it has a different date, ignore it. We have just learned that Biden and Harris are not willing to change the date of the inauguration. So the inauguration will go ahead. It will go ahead as planned on January 20th, and we will not have the meeting that is the Rossmore News publicity listed at that day. It's been postponed a month, so we're going to have our What's New in Recycling talk with Kimberly Lamb, who is the representative from Republic Services to Rossmore, and Kathleen Epperson, who is well known to some of you as our dumpster diving diva, who's given talks before on recycling and composting in Rossmore. So the two of them are sharing the program, and we'll cover the things that are changed and new and different and why they're new. And some of them are actually quite hopeful. So it's it's looking up, not dramatically, but not fast enough, but it's looking better. So
Good.
You'll get another reminder about that next month.
Great. Thanks,
The-
Carol.
the
And
films,
next up,
right? Okay. This time we're recommending 2 films. That's why at the top it says recommendation number 1. We tried to show this film in March, but it turns out that this was scheduled for 5 days into the COVID shutdown. So we could not get access to Peacock as we had planned. So Damnation is a film about removing obsolete dams and the benefits for that, and how it's beginning to happen through some of the major rivers. And it takes a major amount and years and sometimes decades of work of advocates to have these obsolete, expensive dams that are no longer producing significant energy. It's not renewable energy, and they're really messing with the ecology of the whole river and watershed. So one of them is called Damnation. It's available on Prime or on Tubi. Tubi is a free streaming service you can download. Just push tubi.com and you'll be able to get it for free, or Prime if you already have Prime. So that's one of the films, and we'll move on. Oh, wait a minute. Should we show the trailer for that? Do we have time to do that? No, we probably don't. So you're just going to have to remember the title, Damnation, and you can go online and get the trailer yourself. If you just Google Damnation film trailer, you can look at it. Now go to number 2. Next slide.
got it?
Yeah. Okay. This is another film about a dam, and we weren't going to show 2, but this is the same river, the Elwha River, which is in the Washington State Peninsula, that was the biggest dam removal project in the world in 2012. And so both these movies were produced in 2014, but they take it from very different perspectives. This one is much more from the perspective of the indigenous people of the region, their fishing rights, and talks quite a bit about shows, examples, and the efforts that are going into the river restoration after the dam is removed. So each of them feature this very exciting event of the dam being removed. The process for removing the dam is interesting. And one of the reasons we've decided to promote this now is because the next, even bigger dam removal project is in the works for this year. And that's going to be on the Klamath River, which is on the border of Oregon and California, so northern border. So that's to come. I just want to tell you that both films touch on salmon, and salmon was mentioned this evening already. I had no appreciation for how important salmon are for different reasons, including the ecosystems of the river. So even for vegetarians, salmon are incredibly important. They're also kind of important for orca whales and seals. And they also bring calcium up the river. Their carcasses, after they've spawned and are dying in the river, release all sorts of nutrients, but especially calcium that actually has been found to be in the trees and in the wildlife that exists there. So they're supplying, they're just incredible. So, and it's the other one. The Damnation describes about the concerns about having hatcheries and destroying the native fish population. So you learn quite a bit about the ecology of rivers. So I encourage you to watch one or both of those films.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Carol.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Okay, Richard, are you still here?
I am here. Yes, hi everyone. Okay, I have 2 minutes here, so I'll just tell you about one of the things that we're up to. This is the Sustainable Landscape Committee. So as you know, we advocate for sustainable practices in the landscape. In November, I presented part 1 of a Zoom video that we recorded a presentation in a slideshow format to show what sustainable landscapes look like. And that presentation used photos to define the primary principles. part 2, which will be presented at our monthly meeting in a few weeks on January 21st, is a slide presentation that will show case studies of actual landscapes that incorporate the principles, as well as photos that work well in these settings. And that presentation and all future ones that we do will be 20 minutes long. So the goal of these presentations is to help to educate residents not only about what the sustainable principles are, but what they look like, since these landscapes do not follow the technical aesthetics of what people consider pretty. So both video presentations will be posted on our new YouTube channel, which should be available for everyone soon. And you could look for more information about our upcoming meetings in the next 2 issues of Rossmore News. And on another topic, there are a lot of fun educational directions our committee hopes to go in very soon, and we will begin an active campaign to solicit volunteers to assist with our agenda. Most tasks may not require a background in landscape at all. Enthusiasm is what we're most looking for. Okay, thank you. See y'all later.
Okay.
Good meeting.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, I think that's it. Brad?
Yep,
Yes.
I think you're right, Barry. And pretty much on time. How do we do that? Does anybody have any questions?
If you want to end with a movie, you can go back and show one of the trailers. I deliberately, deleted, didn't mention them. Sometimes we end with a movie at the end.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Carol. It enabled us to end relatively on time.
Okay, we'll let it go at that.
Okay.
I respect people's time. They can watch it on their own. Great.
Yeah,
Great.
And the other thing for people to know is that when you share the slides out, on the slides is the link. So all you have to do is click on that, and then remember, the name of the movie, the name, the streaming source that you can access the movie. So if you forget it or didn't write it down, it's on the slides.
Dave's just started.
Great.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Good meeting, everybody.
Thank everyone for coming and for your attention and your enthusiasm. Stay well.
Leave.
Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.